Hello everyone, and welcome to today's webinar. My name is Nicholas Miranda, and today I'll be talking about the fundamental concepts of virtualization and how you can get started with your very own virtual machine. However, before we begin, I would first like to talk about our club. We are a student-run club and we're also affiliated with IEEE. For those who don't know, IEEE, or the Institute of Electrical and Electronic Engineers, is the world's largest technical professional organization who are dedicated to fostering new technological innovation for the benefit of humanity. Now, this means that we're passionate about technology and we're also looking to expand our club. So, if you are a Seneca student and you're also interested in joining, we do currently have a few executive positions that are currently open. However, it's important to note that no experience is actually required and we will train you. With this in mind, joining our club is a great opportunity to learn new things and gain volunteering experience. Now, without further ado, let's talk about virtualization. You might be asking yourself, what is virtualization? Well, virtualization is a method used to partition a computer's hardware resources into separate self-contained operating systems. Virtualization is most often used in servers for cloud computing and is also used for developer bug testing. Another question that might pop up in your head is, well, what software is needed to run a virtual machine? In order to run a virtual machine, you need software known as a hypervisor. A hypervisor is a software that creates a virtualized layer on top of either the hardware or operating system layer of the host computer. However, it's important to note that there are two types of hypervisors. The first type, or Type 1 hypervisor, directly runs on a host computer's hardware and is widely used in many enterprise hardware configurations due to its efficiency. The second type, or a Type 2 hypervisor, directly runs on the host computer's operating system and is also cheaper than a Type 1 hypervisor, but it's less efficient due to it having the ability to only operate on the operating system layer of a host computer. As you can see in this diagram, we have the hardware or operating system of the host computer, and that directly correlates to the hypervisor. And from the hypervisor, you could have multiple VMs. Now, you might be asking yourself, what type of hypervisor are we using today? For the purpose of today's webinar, we'll be using a Type 2 hypervisor. To achieve this, I will be using VMware Workstation 16 Pro, due to it being free for Seneca students on my apps. However, VirtualBox is also a great open source alternative that is also free for the public to use. Now, today we're going to be using Ubuntu Linux. Ubuntu is a commonly used Linux distribution and almost has a Windows-like familiarity. Ubuntu also has three types of operating systems. There's Ubuntu Desktop, which is primarily used for normal use. There's Ubuntu Server, which is generally more used for more server-focused applications. And there's Ubuntu Core, which is more prioritized towards IoT applications. Now, let's begin our tutorial. Now, as you can see, we are on the Ubuntu home page. To download Ubuntu for desktop, we're just going to click Download, and we're going to click on Ubuntu Desktop. For the purpose of this webinar, we're going to download Ubuntu 22.04.1 LTS. This version of Ubuntu is going to be supported for the next 5 years, which means that you'll receive free security and maintenance updates. Now we're going to click on download. Once the download begins, it may take a while to complete. This varies depending on your internet connection. Until then, I'll see you guys once this download is done. Now, once your installation of Ubuntu is completed, we're going to head over to VMware Workstation. As you can see, I already have a couple of VMs that are already loaded onto my computer. However, if this section is blank for you, that's completely okay. To add a new virtual machine, we're going to hit File, and we're going to click New Virtual Machine. As you can see, we're presented with two options, a typical, which is the recommended, and custom, which is the more advanced option. Now, the typical option is more user-friendly in regards to configuring the VM and getting it running, while the custom installation gives you more flexibility with the configurations that you can do. For the purpose of this webinar, I'm just going to go with the typical recommended installation. Next, you're going to want to point VMware towards the file that we recently downloaded. For you guys, it might be in your downloads folder. For me, I recently moved it to my documents folder. So to do that, you're going to want to click Browse and locate the file. Once you locate it, just double click it and VMware will be properly pointing towards that file. Once you're done, you're going to want to hit Next. Now, just like with every operating system, you have to create an account in order to log in. So you're just going to want to fill out this information. Your username can also be anything that you'd like. For the purpose of this webinar, I'm just going to name it Nick. And your password should be something that you'll remember. If you're like me, you're going to want to write it down because I always forget my passwords. Once you're done, you're going to want to hit Next. Now we have to name the actual virtual machine. Just like the virtual machines that I already have loaded onto my computer, you should name it something that's specific. But for the purpose of this webinar, you can name it anything you'd like. I'm just going to name it IEEE Seneca. Once you're done, you can hit Next. Now we're going to want to allocate storage from our host computer onto our VM. I would recommend that you go more than 25 gigs. So for the purpose of this video, I'm just going to go for 25 gigabytes. However, you can allocate as much as you'd like. You just have to keep in mind that when you allocate memory to a VM, that's storage that cannot be used on your actual host operating system. Now, you're going to want to click Store Virtual Disk as a single file. This helps with the actual performance of the VM as opposed to splitting it into multiple files. Once you're done, you're going to want to hit Next. Now we can see that VMware has already gave us a default configuration with what they recommend. If you want to customize it, you can click Customize Hardware. And as you can see, we're given a bunch of options that we could use to customize our VM. For the RAM, I'd recommend that you go for at least 2 to 4 gigabytes, depending on what your computer can handle. You can obviously allocate more RAM to the virtual machine. However, it's not recommended that you allocate more than half of what your host operating system already has. In this case, my computer has 16 gigs of RAM and I wouldn't go more than 8. However, Ubuntu is a very light operating system and doesn't require too much resources. So I'm just going to go with 4 gigabytes of RAM. You can also allocate the number of processors and the number of cores per processor. I'd suggest keeping this default if you're unfamiliar with how CPUs work or what type of CPU you have. But once you're done, you can hit Close. After, you can hit Finish. Now, VMware is going to be booting up the operating system. This may take some time, so until then, let's take a break. Now, once VMware has finished booting up Ubuntu, you're going to be presented with just default configuration settings. So for the keyboard layout, I'm just going to keep it as is, and I'm just going to hit continue. Next, Ubuntu allows us to either do a normal or a minimal installation. The minimal installation just installs the basic utilities and even the web browser, while the normal installation downloads everything that Ubuntu comes with. For the purpose of this webinar, I'm just going to go with the normal installation. This may take some time, and that's all right. Next, you're going to be presented with the option to erase the disk and install Ubuntu. However, in this case, because this is a virtual machine, we have nothing actually on the actual disk as this virtual machine is being virtualized on our actual drive. So we could hit next. And with this pop-up, we can also hit next. Now it's going to ask for our location. So I'm just going to hit continue. And now it's going to ask us a little bit more information about us. So we're just going to put our personal information. And as you can see, with your name, it automatically generates a username with it. And we're just going to type in a password. Again, remember the password, as if you're like me, you're probably going to forget it. Next, we can change what we do when we log in, whether we are asked for a password or we can log in automatically. If you're the only one who uses your computer, then I suggest you could do login automatically. However, just for the purpose of this webinar, I'm just going to keep it as require password to log in. Once you're done, you can hit continue. Now, Ubuntu is going to go through its installation, and once that's done, the operating system should be available to us. However, this may take some more time, and that's all right. Finally, once Ubuntu has finished installing all its required applications and data, you'll be prompted to restart the VM. Once Ubuntu has loaded again and you're on the login screen, you're going to want to log in with the password that you previously created. And if you successfully logged in, you'll have full access to Ubuntu. Now, if you're interested in topics like this, I suggest that you watch our webinar for next month, where we go in depth with the command line and we teach you how to use the command line, and we'll also use SSH. Until then, I'll see you soon.